what am I actually hoping for from this book launch about the new book, Clearing Away, Unveiling the Mental Tricks that Hide Reality? I'm hoping this is the start of a bit of a movement, a discussion movement. We have, Sven has already booked up a number of discussion Zoom appointments. We're going to have a Substack site on which other materials can be posted. So the themes that are talked about in this book can be followed through in discussion groups. And where does that all go? Why are we doing that? It's because we want to help people to see how they can form trust groups using the principles of relationship that are discussed in this book or introduced in this book. A lot of you will know that I've developed emotional logic. And this book is actually the theory background behind that, the systemic background to the patterns of relationships and the patterns of communication that make people feel stuck or move on. But it goes quite deep into what is the human heart? What is the inner heart? What are these values that we're talking about in emotional logic that can either move people on to really creative lives or make them get really stuck? And it goes quite deep into what is the nature of this human life in the world that we have. Unveiling the mental tricks that hide reality. Where are we going with this? What is the reality that's being talked about here? What are the things behind it? It is actually the utter relatedness of life at a heart level. That's the hidden reality, the reality that can get hidden by the way the brain tends to analyze life. And the mental tricks that I've been able to identify through the work that my interest in neuroscience and various other systemic communication between people, I've been able to identify how the brain can flip into different modes that generates different analytical perspectives that hide the relatedness in a certain worldview that focuses on something else, because that's what we're particularly interested in. And the idea that I'm going to be presenting to you is that we can actually identify these and find ways to move through and beyond these worldviews conversationally, because the reality of utter relatedness is a conversational reality that applies both to our human social level, but also can be extended to the way that physics works, to the way the physical world works. So that's what the two threads are going to be coming together. So new science has unveiled how patterns of movement systems make matter, not the other way around. This is the level of physics that comes up later, which not everybody's going to be interested in, but some people are. The patterns of communication that can actually move matter, comes into the new quantum sciences. This is the new science of chaos and of systems and so on. But how can this physical world emerge out of this tumbling chaos, so it seems, of quantum substratum? And the patterns of communication that could do that are the same patterns that can work amongst human beings to actually make social groups that function very creatively and could explore ways forward. So that's what we're going to be looking at during this. But that's what the new science is. The old science of the Enlightenment, the last 300 years, produced this. It had the focus on matter as observers of life, and it generated this worldview that the universe is just matter bouncing around in a space-time container. But the new science has moved beyond that, and space and time and the emergence of substance are now one sort of integrated movement, a systemic movement that shapes life. And we are participators in that. We're not just observers of it, we're in it. And that's the social mix that also shapes the physical world around us. And how can we make that a creative process when we're all so different? So I just want to say dance of light makes our embodiment. This is a little bit where we're going with the whole thing. It's a lovely picture of these boys. And I'm going to move on to the next slide, except that it's not moving. Here we go. It's the same picture again, but I want to go into it a bit more, because this lovely picture actually captures the three analytical perspectives that people have focused on in the past, and also the conversational reality, which is actually what it's all about. This is what we're trying to stimulate, the sense of real connection. This is actually the seed of life. that when we get into a real depth, heart-to-heart level communication, this sort of seen as a light with a new science. Now, the first perspective of the old Enlightenment science was materialism, and that's what's symbolized by that tumble-down shack in the background here. That it constructed a view that the universe is just matter, we sort of observe it and we push it around and so on, but it really left the heart of the human being out of that, just as a separated mind. Each of these three perspectives create a different sort of dualism. And this was a dualism between matter and mind, and nobody knows how to mix those, but we're going to find a way that goes deeper than all three of these dualisms, to where you actually find it in a conversational reality. The second perspective that's figured here is these two boys have got computers, and it's an information technology revolution that we're in. A lot of it depends on this work done by Shannon, who's got a numerical system for working out how much information there is. But unfortunately, that idea of information as an entity itself, as sort of a core substance of life almost, has taken over, so that we've got people around like Musk, saying that we could download our brains into a computer and outlive our bodies. And it's as if, again, a partial truth has got pushed to an extreme, which is the same about the materialism. Yes, it is a physical world, but it's been pushed to an extreme, and people lose sight of it. As the reality of that relatedness is veiled when it gets into this dualistic idea that there is information, and then there is the chaos that we're organizing with this information. So I'm a creator of life, putting information into chaos to bring order out of it. That's sort of the postmodern view that's going around at the moment. But then there's a third analytical perspective in here. And what I'd like to draw your attention to is that wall, that vegetation-covered wall that these boys are sitting on. The third one is actually a spiritual perspective, particularly found in Far Eastern views, but not only. Hegelian spirit, the idea that there is a life force, an ontological life force, deeper than matter, that is shaping life and emerging in the experience of life that we have. But the thing about it being an ontological one is that it has an authority over our lives, to which the general spiritual principles of this are that we need to submit ourselves to it. It has a power over our lives. Whereas the way I'm going to bring these three together, because the informational one is a creator of life, the material one gives us an environment in which to grow and to create things that are helpful. Those three together will generate a much more active engagement in life. But I really want to emphasize this at the beginning. Although each of these perspectives creates a dualism of spirit and souls and so on, but it creates a dualism that we can resolve conversationally. The life that can emerge through all of this fulfills each of those views. It doesn't say they're wrong. It just says they're right as far as they can go, but they need each other to give a complete view of the richness of life that we can share and which we can participate in. So that's the setting in which trust groups hopefully would grow, that we're able to have conversations around those different perspectives, and perhaps also integrating the emotional logic way of understanding emotions, so that if people feel they've got to let go of certain views, certain things they valued, which is what happens in a worldview, you end up valuing certain things more than others, and that can cause breaks in relationships between people. But as you come together, if the emotional logic can help people to harness that loss emotion into a constructive exploration of how to build a future on shared values, on named values, then we can actually move beyond these dualistic worldviews into a truly creative mix in which people together are actually reshaping the world, which of course is going to be increasingly vital in the way that our environment, our globe is changing at the moment, not only with climate, but also population shifts and conflict. So the ability to adapt together in groups is stronger than on our own. And this is what this is all about. How can we make sure that we adapt together rather than separating off into separations and conflicts in that way? The movement that comes up, that bubbles up in the conversations, can be analyzed into change relatedness and repatterning forms. So the changing relatedness of forms is what the brain is recognizing. The brain is a pattern recognizing organ and a memorizing organ. That's its role. And it compares patterns. And out of that comparison, I believe, comes our conscious experience of life. It's comparing patterns that are themselves possibilities, right? But it integrates their features into some sort of the most consistent wholeness that it can manage, given what we're focusing on. And that consistent wholeness is there so that we can choose an action plan and assess its impact by anticipating what action effect is going to, the effect an action is most likely to have. So that's the main thing that's going on in the top part of the brain. But we have a problem here in that the modern neuroscience has got fantastically powerful scanning methods, which of course can work out how the cerebral cortex is being used in this bit or that bit or whatever. So attention has gone there. But attention has not gone to what's happening in the core of the brain, without going to the details of the anatomy of the whole thing. But the core of the brain and the limbic system, whenever you look at these scans, they're always continuously active. So the scans are not able to differentiate one bit from another. And so they've just been left as a bit of a mystery. But there are good reasons for thinking that that is where the integration happens into the sense of being a whole person with my values, that these values are filters on the incoming sensory input that make me knee-jerk react when something happens that does not fit my anticipation. And that starts off an emotional reaction, which sets our thoughts in process, which sets our behavior into a different reactive process. And if we don't actually know our values, then those behavioral reactions can actually cause disruption of relationships, misunderstanding, brokenness, conflict. But the more we understand our values and can name them, the more we're able to actually build adaptable relationships together around a named value that we can agree on. And that's the way these trust groups, I hope, will be able to move, that we'll be able to recognize the worldviews, name the values, harness the emotions into agreed action plans that will have an impact on our environment and on our social setting that will be more creative than just if we knee-jerk react to what's going on. So that core of the brain is where I believe is our inner heart. That is the inner human heart. It affects every single cell of the body, and the cells of the body communicate to other people. The social messaging of emotions is important. And the more we can calm that center of the brain into an organized pattern, which is not just pure calming, the more we'll be able to build stabilizing relationships. So let's move on a bit further. Without going into detail, the book starts going into detail about this, but there are three main areas of the cerebral cortex that are involved in giving us a sense of orientation in space and in time and in real presence. And the only reason I want to show you this slide at the moment, that green area down here, that's the temporal lobe sensory association area. And that one constructs what is called object recognition. But it does it, I mean, the theory that I'm proposing, this is a theory, it's a hypothesis that could be tested. The theory that I'm proposing is that a concept of a solid object is formed from information about changing relatedness. If I say, right, feel the quality of this cloth, you don't just put a fingertip against it, you run your hand over it and you present your brain with a changing pattern of sensory information in which you're forming an impression of the quality of that cloth. If you look at a bicycle from different angles, it's a totally different shape. And yet in this part of the brain, those different perspectives are pulled together to sense there is a bicycle there. Yeah, and the bicycle is something you can get on and ride fast down the street. So it's a functional categorizing of what an object is. And I'd like to suggest, well, the theory that I'm working on is that this particular function of the brain, although it's vital in many respects, when it's taken out of proportion, object recognition veils our capacity to see our utter relatedness in every situation. This part of the brain makes us think about separated objects with boundaries, that I can push this one and it doesn't move that one. But actually, underneath all of that, at a very profound level in the structure of the cosmos, there is a connection going on between them. We won't go into that at the moment, but that's veiled by this object recognition. So that's all I want to say about this at this point. But there is this weak spot in the way that we get orientated in space and time and objects. And we need to find a way that goes beyond that. The book does go into how do we go beyond this? This is what trust groups are all about, to be able to go along this. Now, these three areas communicate with each other. And the next slide is moving a bit more into theory. So I hope you're okay with this. But there's an ancient Celtic icon called a triquetra. It means three corners, triquetra, three corners, but it's not a triangle. And it's an icon of movement, the eternal movement that underlies all that seems constant. And this goes back, way into history. There are two forms of it, a left spin and a right spin. And whether these are associated with yin and yang concepts, I'm not too sure, but here it is, right at the foundational level of movement in the cosmos. There are two spin types of movement. And the fact of their diversity in the model that I'm going to be showing in the second half of this brings about the actual structure of the cosmos, I'm afraid. Simple as that, but actually as complex as that as well. So this is not a trefoil. Those corners actually allow these triquetral movements to connect together. And this double triquetra here is the core icon of what I'm calling triquetral cosmology. It's a conversational model of matter, of mind, of spirit, of relatedness, of social mixture. The whole lot is about communication, about relatedness, dynamic change. And you could imagine these two triquetra, one, they represent two people, for example, in a conversation. Each one is forming their own concept of space and time in their own experience, and the one is influencing the other. So you can carry on seeing that information is coming in here and out here, and this is the way the brain is organizing it into a concept of space and time, and then my communication comes back this way and alters the other person. So this is the theoretical level, but you'll see how this pattern of communications can extend into the physical world, the mental world, the spiritual world, however you're putting your experience of life together. That relational connection is what is veiled by the dualistic worldviews that split this apart. And we're just going to have a quick look at that. But I'm going to ask that when I move to the next slide, I'm going to ask you not to look at it in detail, because it's one of the main things of the book. These diagrams, thank you, Curtis. We worked on these together for years and years. This is the way. I just want to show here that what these are saying, three different ways in which a person can focus their attention on one of the corners of the triquetral movement. We can get fascinated with the forms of life and we turn them into objects. We can get fascinated with the changes of life and turn it into a chaos of processes that we need to put our order into. We can get fascinated with the relatedness of life and see it as a life force separated from us that we've got to somehow come into an obedient relation of submission to. You can see here the triquetra is hidden within me forming my own identity in relation to this objective presence out here, whatever I perceive it to be. Without going to the details, I do in the book. You can see how these break that relatedness because we're seeing life differently. We're focusing on different things. Our values shift. Our decisions and choices shift, the type of relationships that we form shift. If I'm an observer of life, I don't really care what happens, I just push it around. If I'm a creator of life, it's got to be me out there. It's all about me and my impact. If I'm in this sort of life force view, then yes, I'm being a participator in life, but there's a bit of a passivity. And when these come together, there's a much more active mixture of them, so that we become not passive participators, but active participators, shaping the future around named values, building relational strength into the way we connect with the physical world and each other, and can adapt to changing life circumstances. So that's really the nubbins of the book, of the first three parts of the book, is looking at that. But one of the consequences of those three different perspectives is that time looks different in each of them. So in the materialist one, where we're an observer of life, time looks like a time sequence, like a series of events from past to future, only with a causal connection between them. And that, of course, is the materialist worldview. There is only an arrow of time passing forward. But in the creator one, where we're focusing on putting our creative action into the chaos and bringing order out of chaos, it's all about stories. It's all about the beginning, the middle, and the end. And they can be told in any sequence you want, just to keep it interesting. But what's important is what's shaped at the end of it. And then in the life force one, everything becomes about the eternal present. It's the now, but the now is a doorway to eternity. All time, past, present, future, is present in the moment. And we sort of live in that. It's what's African time, where lots of other values are present in the now, and we just have to live those without any real sense of time sequence or the impact on things, or the individual stories. So again, these can all come together, and they come together in timing, the all-important choice. When you're in a relationship or a network of people, the timing of your choices for action do have an impact. And that's where this goes, that what is the creative pace at which to be engaging with this changing environment that we're in? Because at the moment we can knee-jerk react and panic and think, and many young people are panicking and thinking, what on earth can we do about this? But if people can coordinate around named values, then there's just a chance we might be able to get a slightly more constructive thing. So the voice, the light, there's a mutual affirmation that goes on in the light of mutual understanding and the voice of conversations where we're naming what's important. And in that mutuality of relationship, there is a synergy. And that becomes a really important word in the second part of the book. So you can see that I put the double tri-creature here again, just to emphasize that it is all about relationality. And now Jenny picked up on this double tri-creature, and thank you. She started putting it into her artwork. And this is a picture, or you can see here that there is a double tri-creature here and another double tri-creature here. And they're all connecting together. And I found this a really inspiring way of reflecting. The reason I've gone for diagrams like this is that there's a scientist called David Bohm, who was a quantum physicist, and he was saying we cannot express the truths of this depth quantum level of life just mathematically. They have to be expressed in diagrams, in pictures, in artistic expressions, and that's what's happening at the moment. There are many organizations that are exploring the role of art to capture deep truths about life in conjunction with the new science. And I believe, we have an artist here who's doing exactly that. But if you have a look at this, as these come together, there's almost a sort of a wholeness of social interaction here, but not quite. There's a darkness in the background, the mystery, the uncertainty. It could be fearful, it might be good. There might be the growth of something new, but we can have a bit of darkness in our inner hearts, not knowing what's going on. But actually, from the middle of our relationships, bursts light. It just bursts out into the fullness of life that we could possibly know. And of course, that then gets filled with maybe some doubts, but then we come back together and can perhaps reassure each other and strengthen each other. So the brokenness between may not be a bad thing. This is always part of life, isn't it? There always will be uncertainty. But together, we're stronger. Together, we can actually generate the light that can take us on through tumultuous changes, if necessary, if we are faced with tumultuous changes. So the trust groups are about knowing how to talk about worldviews, about values, knowing that our emotional reactions are not part of the problem. They actually are the energy to explore solutions. If we understand them correctly, is connected to our values that we can talk about and be willing to develop our worldviews. So we're not narrowly focused just on materialism, just on spirit, just on my creativity. We're not narrowly focused, but we can balance those all together. So that's what I wanted to say about the general themes of the book to begin with. This communication pattern can string together to make what I believe is a quantum model, that I'm saying there's a fabric of movement deeper than particles and waves that emerges as particles and waves. It's about light, both physical and spiritual. If it is about movement, what we're looking at is scaling between our embodiment. Yes, it is very much about our embodiment. I do believe that Whiteheadian view that and Bohmian, that we're almost like aerials as a whole body as well. And that spiritual is just scaled up into the way that we as whole people communicate with that wholeness that we're part of. But if you see that they're double triquetry all strung together here, I made 3D printed models of these and found that's why you need the two different spins in order to make different shapes. This could be, and you see the blue links off the side, I could make parallel waves that have got red links off or yellow ones, and they have different effects on what I believe is called a spin foam or a fabric of the quantum substratum. That's before it gets patterned into space and time and matter. And these could have effects that are equivalent to light waves, gravitational waves, and thermodynamic waves, which are making this network. But also, if you get alternate left spin, right spin, left spin, right spin, left, they form flat hexagons, not rotating waves, not helicoid waves. And I believe that these flat patterns of movement, stabilized patterns of movement, are the seeds of particles. And these can extend off into whole honeycombs, which can warp and twist and be held in different shapes by crisscrossing waves, just like protein molecules are held into a curled shape and stabilized. It's all about patterns of movement that stabilize. And then that stability also allows certain degrees of change. And that's how we move from a quantum world, a complete spin and turnover, into our classical world of classical physics, where matter does behave predictably. You can design a bridge that will stand up for 100 years, even though it needs maintenance, because there is always a little bit of wear and tear movement going on inside stabilized patterns. But that fabric that could extend through, I'm really not going to spend time on this, but David Bohm's hollow movement of the implicate order emerging as the explicate order as social biophysics. What happens in stars is gravity is converted into heat and light and matter. So the gravity gets pulled into the nuclei of larger mass molecules, and in that process, heat and light radiate out. That same principle of communication could be happening in human groups, where we have the presence of loving kindness matching, love being the gravitational attraction, kindness being the warmth of thermodynamic responsiveness to each other, and presence, the presence of light, bringing a mutual affirmation of of the presence of people in physical light in the daytime. You're affirming the actual structures that are around you so you can interact with them better. But at a spiritual level or a social level, whatever language you like to use, where we're recognizing each other as whole people and that we are people in a cosmos, that sense of presence is much the same as the electromagnetic light that is flying around. So this is where it has gone off into really strange realms. But I would like to be trying to justify those in terms of informational patterns of movement, right, that are reflected from the physics of matter right way up through the biophysics of our embodiment into the biophysics of the brain, where it's affecting cognitive constructs, and that's affecting our communications. Yeah. And that shapes our values, how we react to each other and react to change. Do we react into isolation, or do we pull together into trust groups and build a future on some named values? So just to round off now, where might this go from here? We're starting a Substack community, Quick for Life, substack.com. You can just go on there, sign up for completely free of charge. There'll be 2 discussion threads going there. I'll be posting new materials and linking very much to the books, all based around the book. One of them focusing on trust group humanity, using what I'm calling a yes and no analysis of worldviews from those 3 different perspectives and how do we go through those, and also incorporating emotional logic with that. And then a second one for people who are interested in the new science, particularly on quantum gravity and consciousness, how to understand the new science in a really constructive way that can help us to harness it into responding to the demands of the world in the way that is most constructive for building strong relationships. All of it's based around the book. You could buy it from Amazon. There are links there. But I just want to sort of come back to end on that lovely sort of picture, which will be the theme through these different groups, that there are 3 worldviews. There's a light. The new science is all about the harnessing of light into growth and adaptability, and it can stabilize around that golden ratio, which we'll be looking at in greater depth as to how that can happen amongst people as well as in the physics of life. So thank you very much for staying with this, and I do wish you a very good future from here. Farewell.